The Cathar Empire's Ninth Expeditionary Fleet approached Earth with the supreme confidence that had become the hallmark of their military campaigns across 3 galactic sectors. Admiral Krell stood on the command deck of the flagship, his 4-limbed frame imposing in ceremonial battle armor that had, thus far in his career, remained unscarred by actual combat. Tactical Officer Xyler, your assessment of this Class 3 planet? Admiral Krell's voice rumbled with the distinctive harmonics of the Cathar elite warrior caste. Xyler, more slender than the Admiral, but no less intimidating with his cybernetic sensory enhancements glinting under the ship's ambient lighting, gestured at the holographic display of Earth. Preliminary scans indicate primitive technology, Admiral. They have achieved rudimentary spaceflight, but their weapons systems are based on chemical propellants and crude explosives. Most of their military technologies rely on combustion engines and basic electronics. They have no energy shields, no quantum weaponry, and their most advanced communication systems use electromagnetic radiation easily intercepted by our equipment. Admiral Krell's mouth parts twisted into what passed for a smile in Cathar physiology. Standard conquest protocol, then. Deploy the 1st Vanguard Force to establish a secure foothold. Choose a remote location to minimize initial contact until we're ready for full planetary subjugation. I've already selected an optimal landing zone, Xyler replied, zooming the holographic display to show a densely forested region in the Northern Hemisphere. This area they call North America has a relatively low population density in its forested regions. The 1st Vanguard should establish the forward base with minimal resistance. Within hours, drop ships descended through Earth's atmosphere, their cloaking technology rendering them invisible to the primitive radar systems of the humans. 100 of the Cathar's finest warriors, equipped with energy weapons, reactive armor, and neural-enhanced tactical systems, emerged into the cool morning air of a national forest in the western United States. Commander Vrex, leading the Vanguard, surveyed the landing zone with disdain. Secure perimeter. Commence sensor sweeps for any indigenous life forms, he ordered. Though I doubt anything on this backwater planet poses a threat to Cathar warriors. Unknown to the invaders, just 3 miles away, National Guard Delta Scout Unit was engaged in their monthly weekend training exercise. Sergeant Maria Ramirez, a high school history teacher during weekdays, was leading her 12-person unit through a standard reconnaissance drill. "Thompson, you're breaking formation again," she called out to a lanky man struggling with his pack. In a real combat situation, that kind of mistake could cost lives. "Sorry, Sarge," Thompson replied, adjusting his equipment. "The software update I was debugging last night ran until 3 a.m. My day job's killing me more than these drills." Specialist James Davies, a programmer for a financial technology company, chuckled as he checked his rifle. "Tell me about it. I was explaining database normalization to interns yesterday. Now I'm crawling through mud with an M4. Less chatter, more focus," Ramirez ordered, though not unkindly. Her unit was typical of National Guard formations, citizen soldiers with diverse civilian careers who train part-time. Among her squad were a plumber, an elementary school teacher, an accountant, and even a pastry chef. What they lacked in full-time military conditioning, they made up for in diverse thinking and practical problem-solving skills. Private First Class Rodriguez, the unit's youngest member and a college student studying environmental science, suddenly raised his hand for silence. "Sarge, you hear that?" The unit froze, training kicking in despite their part-time status. "Sounds like humming? Mechanical, but not like any engine I've heard," whispered Specialist Hammond, who worked as a mechanic in civilian life. Sergeant Ramirez signaled the unit to take cover and maintain silence. As squad leader, she had developed an instinct for when situations turned dangerous. This moment felt wrong in ways she couldn't articulate. Through her binoculars, what she saw defied explanation. Figures moving within human coordination, wearing armor unlike anything in Earth's military arsenals, carrying weapons that glowed with strange energies. Her first thought was that they had accidentally stumbled upon a classified military exercise, but that theory evaporated as she observed the beings more closely. Their proportions were wrong. Too tall, too angular, with movements suggesting an alien musculature and skeletal structure. Radio HQ, she whispered to her communications specialist, Private Williams. Possible unknown hostiles, definitely not friendly forces. Williams tried the radio, only to find it producing nothing but static. Comms are down, Sarge. Some kind of interference. Electronic warfare, muttered Davies. Pretty advanced stuff to knock out our frequencies so completely. Ramirez made a quick decision. We need to fall back, observe, and report. This is way above our pay grade. But before they could retreat, one of the alien scouts turned in their direction. Something in its hand beeped, and within seconds, the entire alien formation shifted toward the hidden National Guard unit. They've made us, Ramirez hissed. Defensive positions now. The first energy blast vaporized a tree just above Private Rodriguez's head. The National Guard unit, despite their shock, responded with the discipline drilled into them during their training weekends. They returned fire from covered positions, their standard-issue weapons seeming pathetically inadequate against the otherworldly invaders. Yet, to the astonishment of both sides, the first alien warrior struck by conventional gunfire collapsed as bullets penetrated what appeared to be a joint in its armor. Dark fluid, clearly not human blood, sprayed from the wound. Commander Vrex of the Cathar Vanguard couldn't believe the sensor readings. The primitives have drawn blood. How is this possible? His tactical officer responded with confusion evident even in the Cathar's alien vocal patterns. Unknown, Commander. Their projectile weapons should be ineffective against our Phase 7 combat armor. What the Cathar failed to understand was that their armor, designed to dissipate energy weapons or deflect high-velocity metallic projectiles, had a vulnerability to the specific velocity and materials of Earth's military ammunition. The lead copper composite bullets traveled at a speed just slow enough to create a resonance disruption in the armor's protective field, yet fast enough to penetrate the physical layer beneath. From the flagship in orbit, Admiral Krell and Tactical Officer Zeiler watched the battle telemetry with growing horror. This cannot be happening, Krell growled, his pride wounded more deeply than any of his fallen warriors. How are these primitives inflicting such casualties? Zeiler, more analytical and less blinded by imperial arrogance, studied the combat data with growing concern. Admiral, the humans are demonstrating unexpected tactical adaptability. They're identifying vulnerabilities in our armor and focusing fire on those points. They're using their knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver our forces despite our technological superiority. On the ground, Sergeant Ramirez was orchestrating a fighting retreat, using the forest's dense underbrush and natural features to compensate for their technological disadvantage. Rodriguez, Hammond, flanking fire. Thompson, Davies, fall back to the ridge and provide cover. The National Guard unit, through hundreds of weekend training exercises in these very woods, knew every gully, ridge, and dense thicket. They used fallen logs as cover, created improvised traps by leading aliens into natural deadfalls, and coordinated crossfire patterns that caught the invaders in deadly fields of lead. What had begun as a rout was turning into a shocking battle of attrition. For every National Guard soldier who fell wounded or dead, 4 or 5 Cathar warriors collapsed with critical failures in their armor, sensory systems, or life support functions. Commander Vrex, witnessing his once proud Vanguard force being decimated by what he'd considered primitive vermin, made an unprecedented decision. Defensive formation, cease advance, and establish fortified position. It was the first time in 8 generations that a Cathar Vanguard had been ordered to halt an offensive against a technologically inferior opponent. Aboard the flagship, Admiral Krell raged, while Zeiler attempted to process the impossible data before him. "We need prisoners," Zeiler finally said. "We need to understand what we're facing. These cannot be ordinary humans. They must have advanced technology we're not detecting, biological enhancements, or secret weaponry. Krell, his pride demanding answers for this humiliation, nodded grimly. Send the capture team. I want prisoners for interrogation. I want to know what sorcery these humans are employing to resist the might of the Cthar Empire. The battle on the ground had reached a temporary stalemate. The National Guard unit had taken casualties, 3 dead, 4 wounded, but had inflicted disproportionate damage on the alien force. Sergeant Ramirez was organizing another tactical repositioning when the atmosphere seemed to warp around them. "What the hell?" gasped Davies as strange devices landed around their position, emitting a pulsing feel that made their muscles seize and weapons fall from nerveless fingers. "Neural disruptors," one of the new Cthar warriors announced in a mechanically translated approximation of English. "Resistance is now impossible." Sergeant Ramirez, Specialist Davies, and Private First Class Williams found themselves paralyzed, then unconscious as the alien capture team administered sedatives. Their last thoughts before blackness took them were not of fear for themselves, but concern for what these invaders meant for humanity's future. When Sergeant Ramirez regained consciousness, the disorientation was total. She was restrained on some kind of examination surface in a chamber of gleaming metal and pulsing lights. The air smelled sterile, with an underlying alien tang that triggered her gag reflex. Nearby, Davies and Williams were similarly restrained, both conscious and showing a mixture of terror and defiance. A doorway that seemed to materialize out of the seamless wall admitted to Cthar. Even in her dazed state, Ramirez could tell from their bearing and the deference shown by the other aliens that these were high-ranking officers. "I am Admiral Krell of the Cthar Empire's 9th Expeditionary Fleet," announced the larger one, his words processed through some kind of translation device. "And you will explain how your primitive species has managed to inflict such damage on my elite warriors." Ramirez, still disoriented but drawing on her military training, responded with only her name, rank, and service number. The second alien, slimmer and adorned with what appeared to be cybernetic enhancements, stepped forward. "I am Tactical Officer Zyler. Your designation protocols are unnecessary. We seek information of a different nature. What biological enhancements have you been given? What secret weapons technology are you employing? How has your species mastered combat techniques that can overcome our superior technology?" Davies, despite his fear, couldn't suppress a burst of inappropriate laughter. "You think we're some kind of super soldiers? Buddy, I write code for banking apps 5 days a week. I'm in the National Guard because they help pay for my student loans." The alien's reaction was difficult to read through their alien physiology, but the stillness that came over them suggested profound shock. "Explain," demanded Krell. "What is this National Guard? What is this code and banking apps? Are these military designations?" Williams, the youngest of the three, spoke up. "The National Guard is a reserve military force. We're part-time soldiers. We train 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year. The rest of the time, we're civilians. I'm still in college, studying engineering." The silence that followed was profound. Zyler approached a control panel and brought up holographic displays showing the battle recordings. "You are claiming that the warriors who did this," he gestured at footage of Cthar soldiers falling to coordinated National Guard fire, "are not even your professional military forces." "We're just a scout unit," Ramirez confirmed, beginning to understand the aliens' confusion. "Weekend warriors, they sometimes call us. Most of my squad hasn't fired their weapons outside of required qualifications in months." Krell's alien features contorted in what might have been disbelief or rage. "Impossible. You defeated a Cthar vanguard force with militia troops? With minimal training and primitive weapons? Without biological enhancements?" Davies, whose programmer's mind was rapidly processing the implications, added, "Your armor has vulnerabilities at the joint seams, and your optical sensors can't handle rapid changes in light levels. We just exploited basic weaknesses. Any soldier with basic training would do the same." Zyler turned to Admiral Krell, their alien language flowing in rapid, agitated patterns that the translation devices didn't process. The tension in their movements was unmistakable. "If these are merely your auxiliary forces," Zyler finally said, returning to translated speech, "then what capabilities do your professional military units possess? The question hung in the air, its implications sending visible ripples of discomfort through the Cathar officers present. Ramirez, now fully grasping the psychological advantage they unexpectedly held, decided to press it. Our regular forces? They're another level entirely. Better training, better equipment, constant combat readiness. The Marines, Army Rangers, Special Forces, they'd have handled your vanguard without breaking a sweat. It wasn't entirely true. Any human military unit would have been shocked by alien invaders, but the core message was accurate enough. If a National Guard scout unit could inflict such damage, professional military forces would indeed present a much greater threat. Williams, picking up on Ramirez's approach, added, "And that's just infantry. You haven't even seen our air power, armored divisions, or naval forces." The Cathar officers exchanged another series of untranslated communications. When Krell spoke again, his translated voice carried a new undertone that might have been concern. "You will remain here while we verify these claims." "After the aliens left," Davies whispered, "did we just convince them we're more dangerous than we actually are?" "Maybe," Ramirez replied quietly. "But remember, we're just one squad from a part-time military unit, and we still managed to take down a bunch of their troops. Imagine what a Marine Expeditionary Unit or an Army Ranger Battalion would do. If we ever get out of here," Williams added, "nobody's going to believe this story. It's like something out of a movie." Aboard the command deck, chaos had erupted among the Cathar leadership. Admiral Krell was facing the first significant crisis of his military career, while Tactical Officer Zeiler was frantically revising all previous intelligence assessments of Earth. The preliminary reports were catastrophically wrong, Zeiler told the assembled command staff. "We engaged what we now understand to be an auxiliary scouting unit, essentially civilians with minimal military training, and suffered casualties at an unacceptable rate of 4:1. A murmur of disbelief ran through the gathered officers. Commander Thrix, head of military intelligence, raised an objection. "Perhaps these prisoners are lying, attempting to intimidate us with false claims of greater military strength." "I consider that," Zeiler replied. "But the battle data supports their assertions. Their tactics were effective, but relatively basic. They used their environment and identified weaknesses in our systems, but showed none of the advanced techniques we would expect from elite troops. And yet, they still inflicted severe damage on our vanguard." Admiral Krell, his pride wounded but his tactical mind still functioning, asked the question hanging over the command deck. If these were merely reserve troops, what would happen if we engaged their professional military forces? The silence that followed was answer enough. News of the engagement had spread through the lower decks of the Cathar fleet. Warriors who had expected an easy conquest were now exchanging nervous rumors about the fearsome human fighters who had decimated the supposedly elite 1st Vanguard Force. "I heard they fight without fear of death," whispered one young warrior. "My clutchmate in the medical bay says their primitive projectiles somehow pass right through our armor at certain points," added another. "If their part-time fighters can do this much damage, what will their elite forces do to us?" On Earth, the situation was developing rapidly as well. When Delta Scout Unit failed to check in, search and rescue protocols were activated. The first helicopter survey teams discovered the battle site, an area of devastated forest with strange burn patterns, unidentifiable metallic debris, and evidence of a fierce firefight. Most concerning was the absence of Sergeant Ramirez and several of her team, while the bodies of those killed in action showed wounds unlike anything the recovery teams had ever seen. At the Pentagon, General Catherine Miller was examining preliminary reports with growing concern. 28 years in the military had not prepared her for the images and field analyses coming from the National Forest. "These aren't conventional weapons," stated Dr. Howard Patel, the scientific advisor hastily attached to the investigation. "The residual energy signatures, the material composition of these fragments, they're not consistent with any known Earth technology." General Miller, a woman whose calm under pressure had become legendary, felt a cold not forming in her stomach. "You're telling me we're dealing with non-terrestrial combatants?" "I'm saying the evidence points to technology beyond our current capabilities," Dr. Patel replied cautiously. The logical conclusion is problematic. Miller made a rapid series of decisions. Establish a 5-mile exclusion zone around the incident site. Deploy the 75th Ranger Regiment for perimeter security, but with strict orders not to engage unless fired upon. Give me satellite coverage. I want to know if there's anything unusual in orbit. And scramble the first fighter wing for combat air patrol, weapons hot, but holding unless I give the order. As these orders went out, she added, and someone find me those missing National Guard personnel. Dead or alive, I need to know what we're dealing with. While Earth's military was mobilizing, the Cathar fleet remained in their holding position, paralyzed by strategic indecision. Admiral Krell had reported the situation to the Supreme High Command through superliminal communications, only to receive orders that reflected the leadership's inability to process this unexpected development. Verify intelligence. Proceed with invasion if strategic assessment indicates acceptable casualty rates. Fleet preservation takes priority if resistance exceeds projected models. Glory to the Empire. In other words, Krell was on his own. We need more information, Zyler insisted during the tense command meeting that followed. Our initial intelligence was clearly flawed. Before we commit to full-scale invasion or retreat, we must understand what we're truly facing. Krell, initially reluctant to admit the extent of their miscalculation, finally nodded. Prepare a stealth reconnaissance mission. I want detailed scans of their military capabilities, orbital defenses, and command structure. Use our most advanced cloaking technology. We cannot risk detection at this stage. Within hours, a Cathar scout ship, barely larger than a terrestrial automobile and equipped with the fleet's most sophisticated stealth systems, was descending through Earth's atmosphere. Its mission was simple: observe, record, and analyze without engaging or being detected. What it discovered sent waves of anxiety through the Cathar command structure. Earth's military response to the forest incident was revealing a level of organization, equipment, and readiness far beyond what the Cathar had anticipated. The scout ship's sensors detected advanced fighter aircraft patrolling the area, ground forces with sophisticated detection equipment establishing defensive positions, and satellite activity suggesting a global alert status was being implemented. More concerning were the intercepts of military communications indicating that this was merely a preliminary response, the first movements of a vastly larger military machine that was now grinding into action. Zyler reviewed the reconnaissance data with growing dismay. Their professional military forces are mobilizing. Look at the deployment patterns. They're establishing layered defenses while preparing offensive capabilities. The technological gap is not as wide as we believed. Their aircraft, while using atmospheric propulsion, show unexpectedly advanced avionics. Their ground forces have detection systems that nearly spotted our scout ship despite our cloaking. The most alarming discovery came when the scout ship briefly penetrated restricted airspace over what appeared to be a military research facility. Despite its brief presence, the sensors captured evidence of directed energy weapon prototypes, kinetic orbital defense systems in development, and what might have been early-stage force field technology. They're more advanced than we thought, Zyler concluded. Not our equals yet, but the gap is closing rapidly. And they have numbers, billions of potential fighters compared to our expeditionary force of thousands. Admiral Krell, facing the most difficult decision of his career, ordered a full strategic reassessment. Using the new intelligence, Zyler ran invasion simulations that painted an increasingly grim picture. Even with our technological advantages, full-scale invasion would result in casualties exceeding 60% of our force before we could establish planetary control, Zyler reported to the stunned command staff. Earth's military, once fully mobilized, would present a formidable defense. Their industrial capacity could rapidly replace losses, while our supply lines extend across interstellar distances. The simulation results glowed ominously on the command deck's main display. Mission failure probability, 83.7%. Admiral Krell stared at the projection, his Cathar physiology unable to hide the stress of the moment. The Empire had not faced a significant military defeat in 7 generations. To return with news of retreat would end his career, possibly his life. To proceed with the invasion despite these projections would likely end in the destruction of the Ninth Fleet. "Admiral," Zyler said quietly, "we have another problem. Earth's detection systems are improving by the hour. They're adapting based on the forest encounter, adjusting their sensor arrays to search for our energy signatures. Our window for undetected withdrawal is closing." In the detention area, Sergeant Ramirez, Specialist Davies, and Private Williams had no way of knowing the strategic crisis they had inadvertently created. Their concerns were more immediate, particularly what would happen to them, and by extension, to Earth. "They're scared," Davies observed after another interrogation session. "You can see in the way they move, how they keep asking the same questions about our military capabilities." "Good," Williams replied. "Maybe they'll think twice about a full invasion." Ramirez, who had been quietly observing their captors' patterns, had reached a similar conclusion. "They underestimated us completely. Now they're scrambling to reassess. The question is whether that works in our favor or against it. Cornered enemies can be unpredictable." On the command deck, Admiral Krell had finally reached his decision. Summoning the entire command staff, he activated the ship's formal recording protocols, ensuring that his words would become part of the official Kthar military record. "Based on updated intelligence and strategic projections, I am ordering the immediate termination of Operation Earth Subjugation. The 9th Expeditionary Fleet will withdraw from this system following stealth protocols to avoid detection." The silence that followed was profound, broken only when Commander Thrix asked the question on everyone's mind. "And the prisoners, Admiral?" This sparked a heated debate. Some officers argued for executing the humans to eliminate witnesses. Others suggested taking them back to Kthar space for further study. Zyler, however, proposed a third option. "Release them," he said, surprising the gathered command staff. "Return them near their capture point with minimal memory alterations. Their story will seem so incredible that they may not be believed, giving us time to withdraw. Killing them risks elevating the incident into a confirmed alien attack requiring full military response. Taking them with us eliminates any possibility of plausible deniability." Krell, weighing the options, finally nodded. "Prepare the prisoners for return. Minimal memory adjustments only, enough to blur details of our ship and technology, but leave the core experience intact. I want Earth's leadership questioning the reliability of their account, not rallying around martyrs or searching for missing personnel." As the Kthar fleet prepared for withdrawal, advanced teams returned to recover any remaining evidence from the forest battlefield. They worked with frantic efficiency, knowing that Earth's military was closing in on the area. A few pieces of alien technology were too damaged or embedded to retrieve, left behind in the haste of departure. Sergeant Ramirez, Specialist Davies, and Private Williams were sedated, placed in a small transport craft, and returned to a location near their original position. Their equipment was returned, though any samples they might have collected of Kthar technology had been carefully removed. As instructed, the memory modifications were subtle, just enough to introduce elements of uncertainty without erasing the core experience. When they regained consciousness, it was to the sound of approaching helicopters and human voices calling through the forest. "Over here," William shouted, his voice hoarse. "We're over here." Within minutes, they were surrounded by U.S. Army Rangers, weapons raised until identities could be confirmed. Sergeant Maria Ramirez, National Guard Delta Scout Unit. Ramirez identified herself, squinting against the helicopter searchlights illuminating the night forest. We were taken. They're gone now, but they were here." "Who was here, Sergeant?" asked the Ranger captain, signaling his medics to check the disoriented guard members. "Not human," Davies said, knowing how it sounded. "You won't believe us, but they weren't from Earth." The Rangers exchanged glances, but their expressions suggested this wasn't entirely unexpected news given what had already been found at the battle site. Within hours, Ramirez, Davies, and Williams were in a secure military facility, undergoing medical examinations and preliminary debriefing. Their story, while consistent among the three of them, contained the intended gaps and uncertainties planted by the Cathar memory modifications. General Miller personally oversaw their questioning, her experience telling her that despite the fantastical elements, the core of their account aligned with the physical evidence too perfectly to dismiss. These part-time soldiers engaged an alien vanguard force and inflicted enough damage to make them reconsider an invasion, she summarized in her classified report to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The implications are simultaneously encouraging and terrifying. We bloodied their nose with a National Guard unit, but we've also revealed our existence to a technologically superior interstellar empire. The report concluded, "It is my recommendation that we immediately establish a dedicated space defense command, accelerate all relevant weapons research programs, and implement a global early warning system for potential extraterrestrial threats. The window of opportunity created by this unexpected victory may be brief. We must use it wisely." In the void beyond Mars, the Cathar fleet engaged their interstellar drives, distorting space-time to begin the long journey back to Empire territory. On the command deck, Admiral Krell and Tactical Officer Zyler watched the blue planet recede on their viewing screens. "I will likely be demoted for this retreat," Krell said quietly. "Perhaps even executed if the Supreme Command wishes to make an example." Zyler, whose analytical mind had saved the fleet from destruction, nodded solemnly. "I share responsibility for the failed intelligence assessment. My career ends with yours, Admiral." Both knew that the Cathar Empire forgave failure rarely and never forgot perceived weakness. Yet neither regretted the decision to withdraw. "The humans defeated our vanguard with their reserve forces," Krell said, voicing the thought that had haunted the command staff for days. "Imagine what their professional military would have done to our main invasion force." "Perhaps someday the Empire will return with a proper armada," Zyler replied. "But not soon, and not without extensive preparation. The humans have time now, time to develop, to strengthen, perhaps even to reach the stars themselves. And all because we made the mistake of engaging a scout unit." Krell said with a bitter laugh that the Cathar vocal anatomy transformed into something like a hissing growl. "A part-time, minimally trained scout unit." As Earth diminished to a bright point of light and then vanished from their sensors, both Cathar officers shared the same unspoken thought. In their arrogance, they had awakened a sleeping giant they had mistaken for a lesser species. The true horror was not just their defeat, but the knowledge that somewhere behind them, humanity would now be looking to the stars with new awareness and purpose. Whatever the Cathar Empire planned next, Earth would be ready. And all because a weekend training exercise had unexpectedly become humanity's first line of defense against extraterrestrial invasion. The data recording of the entire incident, including the battle telemetry and prisoner interrogations, was secured in the fleet's most restricted archives. Attached to it was Zyler's final assessment, a warning to any future Cathar commander who might consider Earth a target. Approach with overwhelming force or not at all. These humans, these weekend warriors, have shown us the folly of underestimation. May the Empire never make this mistake again.